In this lecture, we're going to take a look at the Suez Crisis, how the Eisenhower administration responded to the crisis, and how it impacted the U.S. relationship in the Middle East. And so, basically what happens is in 1954, the president of Egypt is a guy by the name of Nasser. And Nasser is a very popular figure in Egypt. He is a nationalist, and he is taking power of Egypt at a time when there's a lot of problems in Egypt, and he's promising that he's going to fix things in this country that lies northern Africa but is a part of the Middle Eastern world. And so Nasser is coming to power, and he wants to modernize.
Damn, baby, all I need is a little bit
of this and a little bit of that. He wants to modernize Egypt. He wants to develop the country. He wants to kind of stabilize, the economic foundations of the country. And one of the big goals that he has, and he's a very popular guy, you could see the crowd supporting him when he comes into power, is he wants to build a dam. And this is just one of many different problems, but he wants to build a dam down here in Egypt with the Nile River that will produce power as well as irrigation for farmers in the area. And in order to build this dam, he basically turns to a variety of different countries, including the United States and England. And tentatively, they're going to give him the money to get this dam going because Egypt doesn't have enough resources to build it on its own. Now, here's what happens. In addition to wanting money to buy this dam, which the U.S. and England guarantee tentatively, Nasser also wants to buy weapons from them. He wants to buy arms from the United States, and Eisenhower has some concerns, legitimate concerns, about what those arms, what those weapons are going to be used for. In fact, Eisenhower's response is, you can buy them, but only if you promise that they're going to be for defensive purposes, meaning you're not going to use them to go attack some other country, Israel. And we need to supervise the training and the use of these weapons. There's some strings attached. And Eisenhower is really concerned about America's ally in the Middle East, Israel. And there's a whole controversy there with the creation of the nation of Israel, and the U.S. has been an ally of Israel from the start under President Truman. So Nasser doesn't like these terms and decides, peace. Later. Bye-bye. I'm going to go get him from the Soviets. And the one thing that Nasser was able to do, and perhaps brilliantly, is that he was determined to play the U.S. and the Soviets against one another. He knows the world is divided up between these two superpowers, so if the U.S. won't give me what I want, I'll go to the Soviets. He's a nationalist. He's not ideologically bound to any one country. He's there to benefit Egypt and his own administration. So he decides, and the Soviets agree, to sell him the weapons. Now, to complicate this issue, it's not just about this money for this dam and these weapons. There's a whole bunch of other things.
Walk like an Egyptian.
There's a whole bunch of other things that cause the U.S. and Egypt and England and other countries to have a tense relationship. And one is the concern over the security of Israel, which I've already mentioned. Another thing is Nasser recognizes the People's Republic of China as the government of China. And he does so in spite of the U.S. insisting that the legitimate government of China is in Taiwan. So that angers Eisenhower's administration. Eisenhower's administration is angry when they agree to the deal with the Soviet Union, with the weapons deal. And there's a frustration amongst Eisenhower and his Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, that Nasser's playing both sides. That he's, trying to, work with the U.S., meanwhile, while also working with the Soviets. Well, the thing goes just really south when Nasser decides, once the U.S. cancels the offer for the loan, that he's going to go ahead and take over the Suez Canal. Little background. Suez Canal's been around. It's been around even before the Panama Canal, and it's a very important canal because it allows countries access into the Mediterranean, access into the oil-rich Middle Eastern countries, and you can see on this map that it cuts down travel substantially. And in 1956, Nasser
Walk like an Egyptian.
nationalizes the Suez Canal, and basically that means he takes it over. It was being run by British and French business interests, and he basically takes over the canal. And what happens next is, obviously, there's an outcry. Oh my gosh, he's taken over the canal, and now it is in the hands of Egypt. And what happens next is, it's not the U.S., but it's France, England, and Israel. They decide that they're going to take the canal by force. France, England, and Israel declare war, attack Egypt. And basically they attack, paratroopers land in the country. There's all sorts of different things that happen at different times. You can pause and take a look, but troops are sent in. The Sinai Peninsula is taken. The canal is seized by these three countries, and Egypt has been attacked. And you have war beginning. And what happens in the United States is Eisenhower is not happy about this. In fact, he is quite angry because he wasn't consulted. He didn't know that England and France and Israel were going to do this, and these are their allies. And he's angry. In fact, those countries felt that the U.S. would provide them with oil because much of their oil came from the Middle East, and they knew that oil would be cut off during this crisis, and they thought the U.S. would just kind of step in and give it to them. Eisenhower refuses. He's angry because this crisis, this Suez Crisis, is leading to the threat of World War III and atomic war. The Soviet Union responds by threatening nuclear retaliation if there is not immediate withdrawal. And what you have in Egypt in the Suez Crisis is a near war, and it would have been a world war, because if Soviets attacked England and France, the U.S. is obligated to come to their defense under the terms of NATO. NATO had been around, and an attack against one is an attack against all. Eventually, Eisenhower and the Soviet Union, because of the threats, because of the negotiations, get the countries of France and England and Israel to withdraw. But the consequences of the Suez Crisis are bad for not just England and France and Israel, but also for the United States. Even though they were not a part of this war, they're aligned with the countries that are. And the result is Egypt moves closer to the Soviet Union. They turn even more so to the Soviet Union for aid and other things. And the relationship between the United States is fragmented and fractured. And another problem is the Suez Crisis. Nasser comes off as quite the hero amongst people in the Middle East, and it leads to a rise of Arab nationalism. And Arab nationalism is not because of Nasser. It comes from a place of, for a very long time, the countries of Western Europe and the United States have exploited the Middle East. And these countries are increasingly turning to groups, sometimes radical, sometimes communist, that are willing to speak out and to resist U.S. and English and French influence. So Nasser is seen as a hero because he does this. He takes the canal and he stands up to the Western world. Now, after the Suez Crisis, luckily things calmed down. There is no war, but there's a near war. There's a near atomic threat. The anti-Western sentiment increases. Nasser becomes an even bigger deal. And the U.S., shortly after this, Eisenhower issues what is known as the Eisenhower Doctrine. And there is Eisenhower with the leader, the king of Saudi Arabia, and Richard Nixon. And the Eisenhower Doctrine is basically the U.S. saying to countries in the Middle East, if you are in danger of communist threats or advances, we will come to your aid.
When you need a hand,
Lean on the USA.
somebody to lean on.
And much like the Truman Doctrine, which was more focused on Europe, the U.S. under the Eisenhower Doctrine is saying we will be the military and economic ally of any Middle Eastern country that is under the threat of communist aggression. But a big important idea that you need to be aware of, you two people, is the fact that very often the U.S. confused communism with nationalism and vice versa. When countries in the Middle East and other parts of the so-called Third World were trying to do things, America oftentimes presumed incorrectly that it was nothing more than communism expanding. And sometimes, very often in times, supported dictatorships and cruel regimes as long as they were anti-communist. And the Eisenhower Doctrine basically has the U.S. be the protector of the Middle East, another region of the world during the Cold War. Make sure you like the video, share the video, post comments, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. Peace.